2 years ago, I won this primary with 73% of the vote. I could easily have done the same again. The path was clear, but it would have required that I go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election. It would have required that I enable his ongoing efforts to unravel our democratic system and attack the foundations of our republic. That was a path I could not and would not take.
You just heard the concession speech from Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney, who is one of very few Republican lawmakers who's been willing to hold Trump accountable for what he did in inciting violence on January 6th, for what he did in continuing this narrative about the election being stolen from him, when in reality there hasn't been a single shred of evidence indicating widespread voter fraud. And Liz Cheney knew that she was taking a risk by holding Trump accountable, and that risk came to fruition with her essentially losing this primary in her state of Wyoming. Now, as a result, her term will expire on January 3rd of next year. And I want to give you some more details about what this all means electorally before ripping Cheney to shreds, because she does deserve it. Doing one good thing doesn't erase a record of terrible, terrible policies, warmongering, support for war crimes. We'll get to all of that in just a moment. But what were the results of this election? Well, with the Republican Party clearly serving Trump, even when he's not in power, her decision again to hold him accountable hurt her considerably. Harriet Hageman, a lawyer with Trump's endorsement, ousted Cheney on Tuesday, clinching the GOP nomination for deep red Wyoming's only House seat. Cheney fell in defeat despite her appeals to Democrats and independents to re-register as Republicans and vote for her. In fact, her opponent had about 66% to Cheney's nearly 29%. And that's insane, because the last time she ran for re-election, she won easily with upward of 70% of the vote in her favor. And it's because she's deeply conservative. Liz Cheney has always been deeply conservative. And despite what she thinks about Donald Trump today, fact of the matter is she voted along with his agenda 90% of the time. So let's not forget about that. Now, her opponent used to support Cheney, okay, this is Hageman, used to support Cheney, and in 2016, she even opposed Donald Trump, calling him, get a load of this, racist and xenophobic. But she has since come to embrace Trump when she realized that it could actually serve her own personal interests, of course. That's my addition. And basically claimed that the 2020 election was rigged against him, as many successful Republican candidates around the country have claimed. Now, do they claim that because they genuinely think that Biden rigged the election? Or do they say it because they don't have the balls to tell the truth about what really happened? They don't have the balls to stand up to Donald Trump. And more importantly, aside from being massive cowards, these are individuals who are just interested in protecting their own political careers, and they're willing to sell out the American people to do just that. Now, what's even more scary, if you take a broader look at what's happening with these congressional elections, some gubernatorial elections as well, in battleground states, candidates who deny the legitimacy of the 2020 vote have won GOP nominations this year for nearly 2/3 of state and federal offices with power over elections. So there is a scary component to this, because with the help of this right-wing media ecosystem, you have Republican voters who have been convinced, absolutely convinced, that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. They live in an alternate reality, and it's of course partly because they live in a certain filter, media filter bubble, where they're hearing lies over and over and over again. Now, Trump's impact was felt in some of these other primary races last night. For instance, moderate, as she's being described, Lisa Murkowski faced a Trump-backed GOP challenger, Kelly Tshibaka, and both advanced from an all-party primary to the general election. Former Governor Sarah Palin, I can't believe she's still around, an anti-establishment Republican backed by Trump, advanced in the all-party primary to November's election in Alaska's lone congressional district. Now, there are reports that Liz Cheney is considering what the future holds for her political career. And she was asked point blank during an interview on the Today Show whether she might consider higher office. Let's watch.
You said this fight is just beginning. You've even launched a political organization already. So let's just be straight about it. Are you considering running for president yourself?
Well, what I'm going to do, Savannah, is spend the next several months completing my work in Congress, obviously completing my work representing the people of Wyoming. We have a tremendous amount of work left to do on the January 6th committee.
She didn't deny that she's considering it. Clearly, it's something that she's thinking about. And while I'm uncertain as to how serious she is in considering a presidential run in 2024, anyone in the Democratic Party, any Democratic voter who thinks, no, I mean, everything Liz Cheney has done in the past is great, she should totally run. It really depends. How would she run? Would she run as a Republican or would she run as a Democrat? And I think that's a legitimate question to ask, because ever since the Trump era came to fruition, what we've noticed is that the so-called never Trump Republicans, many of whom were supportive of the Bush administration, have now traveled over to the Democratic Party. And I don't want them. I don't want them at all. I don't want the Democratic Party to be essentially become realigned to represent the garbage that we experienced during the Bush years. And Liz Cheney, along with her father, of course, Dick Cheney, it's very representative of the neoconservatives that destroyed this country during Bush's 8 years in office. And I think it's really, really important to remember that. Now, that's the reason why I have problems with Cheney. But the Republican voters in Wyoming, they were asked, what do you think about her potentially running for president in 2024? Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
I don't think I would support her in a presidential run.
No, please, no.
I wouldn't support her as a dog catcher.
I still think that Trump did a lot for Wyoming and that we've actually been hurt by our new president. So
I'm not a Cheney fan.
No, I think she should just go back to Virginia and get another job. She's redoing her resume today.
Now, those interviews serve as anecdotal evidence for the disdain that Republican voters in her own state have toward her. But I would argue that the fact that she very easily lost the primary race is pretty indicative of how Republicans feel about her brand of republicanism, which is republicanism that includes all of the policy proposals, all of the ideas that we absolutely hate. But she's willing to tweak the party a little bit by being critical of Donald Trump. Not good enough. Not someone that I want to see as a leader. I will say she's done a good job with the January 6th hearings. She's thorough, she's persuasive, but I'm uncertain as to whether or not she's swayed anyone who was more aligned with Donald Trump's BS about the election being stolen. I think to some extent she's preaching to the choir on that issue. But I do want to talk a little bit about what it would mean if she ran, right? So if she runs as a Republican, I think it might actually be a good thing. Who knows if she would split the vote enough for it to make a difference? But running as a Republican, have at it. It has no impact on me. It has no impact on, where the Democratic Party moves to. So that's fine. But it would be kind of dumb to run as a Republican, wouldn't it? Considering that Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, and the voters seem to really love him. Following the FBI raid, his polling actually increased, and he widened his lead against Ron DeSantis to the tune of 10 points. Ron DeSantis was closing in on him, and then after the raid, his supporters became much more galvanized. So the idea of Liz Cheney running as a Republican for president in 2024 seems like, honestly, a dumb idea for her. But if she did it, I wouldn't care one way or the other because it really doesn't have an impact on us, right? Now, would she run as a Democrat? I don't think so. But whether she does or doesn't, I think this brings us to a much more important issue that I think needs to be addressed. I've seen other progressive shows and writers address this as well, but I just really want to double down on it. Liz Cheney is not our hero. Liz Cheney is bad, very bad, okay? She didn't really seem to have a problem with Trump for the majority of his term. It wasn't until Trump tried to essentially overturn the results of the presidential election where she realized, nah, maybe I shouldn't continue enabling this clown. And she suffered the political consequences for that, to be sure. But nonetheless, let's remember who Liz Cheney is, okay? Cheney has built a staunchly conservative voting record over nearly 6 years in Congress. When Trump was in office, she voted with him more than 90% of the time. Her family is Republican royalty in Wyoming, although I'm a little unsure if that's really still the case. To remind you of a few other things, she promoted regime change in Iran. She also, in 2009, founded, along with Bill Kristol, another war hawk, something known as Keep America Safe. It's an organization concerned with national security issues, or at least it's an organization that pretends to be concerned about national security issues in order to fearmonger to Americans and manufacture consent for more war in countries that we really shouldn't be meddling in. And why does she do it? Could have something to do with the fact that she's looking out for her defense contractor friends, campaign contributors. I mean, you guys know the drill. You know how this all works. Again, the Bush era was a disaster. Let's not forget about it. I'm still old enough to remember warrantless wiretapping. I'm still able to remember the torture, which they used euphemisms for, like enhanced interrogation, waterboarding people. I still remember what happened at Abu Ghraib, where US members of the military were humiliating, torturing, and photographing some of the prisoners that they had at that facility. Cheney's also, as I've mentioned, a neoconservative. Her focus has always been on hawkish foreign policy, support for the military, which is fine. But when they say support for the military, they're not talking about the men and women who put their lives on the line to defend the country. They pretend like they care about those individuals, but let me remind you, their starting pay is so abysmal that it would make minimum wage workers in this country, feel like they might be the lucky ones. They're making less than $20,000 a year starting pay to be a member of the military. No, when she talks about supporting the military, she talks about supporting the industries that have to do with military operations. Again, these private defense contractors that make a killing off of people pushing for more defense spending and more war, people like Cheney. She's also very pro-business and is a so-called social conservative. What does social conservative mean? Social conservative just means we don't want any social safety net. We don't want any social spending. We want tax cuts for the rich. Again, a representative of everything progressives are supposed to despise. But the establishment Democratic Party is willing to open their arms to her because, to be quite honest, they're more interested in being inviting toward Bush era Republicans as opposed to leftists or progressives. It's amazing how complimentary they've been toward Cheney, especially over the last year. And finally, let me allow John Nichols to have the last word on Liz Cheney. He had an interview with Democracy Now! Today. Here's what he had to say about it.
Liz Cheney is every bit as right-wing as Donald Trump, perhaps even a little more right-wing than him on some issues. And so people should be very cautious about imagining that she would seek office in the future as some sort of moderate Republican or something like that. That's not who she is. She has been good on standing up to Trump on these democracy issues, but the bottom line is she is an extreme right-wing conservative.
Damn right, she is. There is no way in hell anyone should be referring to her as a moderate Republican. Policy-wise, she's not a moderate Republican. And just like Mike Pence, she did the bare minimum, which is stand up to protect our democratic process. That's not some heroic thing to do. That is, again, the bare minimum. And I feel like voters in this country are constantly being conditioned to have insanely low expectations of our politicians, including politicians in the party we just support, and even politicians in the party we don't support. Certainly the case with Liz Cheney. We need to have higher standards. And just because we might share an enemy with Liz Cheney doesn't mean that she would be a good representative for the American people, doesn't mean that she would be a good leader. In fact, everything that we are feeling pain from today, policy-wise, she has supported and she would double down on if she had the chance to do it. That's who Liz Cheney is. So sure, kudos for standing up to Donald Trump, knowing that it's gonna cost you a congressional seat, but she knows she's gonna be just fine. That revolving door keeps revolving. It's not like she's gonna be jobless. She'll be okay. In the meantime, let's not be stupid and pretend like she's America's hero for doing the bare minimum.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.